My name is Rachel Pierce, I'm 27, and at a family dinner my parents told me to quit my job or leave the family forever. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. It was Thursday, 2011, the kind of evening that already felt heavy. My parents loved formality even at home. The dining room table stretched long and polished, lined with tall candlesticks. The smell of garlic bread and roast lamb filled the space, but I couldn't taste anything. I was already tense. My sister sat across from me in a sleek navy dress, her wine glass half full, her smile sharp. I knew something was coming. She always smirked that way when she thought she was about to win. Dad cleared his throat, laying his fork down with the kind of precision that meant a verdict was coming. "Rachel," he said, "this obsession with your so-called startup has gone on long enough." I froze, fork still in my hand. "What do you mean?" His voice cut like a blade. "Quit that nonsense job and come work at the firm. Or you're out. No middle ground." The table went silent. Even the faint clink of cutlery stopped. Mom folded her napkin neatly and placed it beside her plate. Her eyes gleamed like steel polish too bright. "It's time to grow up. Either join the family business or stop calling yourself our daughter." My throat tightened. The chandelier above buzzed faintly, its light pressing down on me like heat. My fork slipped, clattering against the porcelain plate. The sound echoed through the silence, too loud, too final. I searched their faces. My father's jaw set in stone, my mother's calm cruelty, my sister's faint smirk curling higher at the edge of her lips. "Are you serious?" I asked finally, my voice shaking just enough to betray how deeply it cut. Dad leaned back, arms crossed, tone firm as oak. "Dead serious. Quit or walk away." Something inside me went still. Not broken, not panicked, but clear. Like the sharp silence before a storm breaks. Because what they didn't know, what I hadn't told them, was that 2 days earlier my app had closed its first international licensing deal. Revenue projections for the next 12 months sat at $100 million. I kept my face calm. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just sat there silent while the people who raised me threatened to cut me off. Unaware that in 6 months they'd be the ones begging to get back in. I didn't know yet how far they'd go to erase me. But I did know one thing. I would never forget that dinner. The next evening, Friday at 1946, I walked into the living room after a long day coding at my cramped office. My phone buzzed with a family group text. It was a photo. My sister standing in front of a gleaming glass building, my father's arm draped proudly over her shoulder, my mother beaming beside them. The caption underneath made my chest tighten. "Congratulations to our new CEO. The future of Pierce & Company has never looked brighter." I stared at the words, reading them 3-4 times. My sister, not even 25, had been made CEO of the family firm. Just 24 hours earlier, they told me to quit or leave. Now they'd elevated her, making sure I knew exactly where I stood. Outside the circle cut out. My thumb hovered over the phone screen. A part of me wanted to reply, to type something sharp. Funny, I didn't realize competence was optional. But I didn't. Instead, I set the phone down on the coffee table and listened to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The only sound in my apartment. 2 hours later, my sister herself called. The time flashed on the screen. 21:58. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was smug, laced with triumph. "You heard the news, I assume?" she said, not bothering to hide her glee. "Yes," I answered evenly. "Don't take it personally. You're good at whatever it is you do. But this?" She laughed softly. "This is real business, Rachel. Real leadership. Something you just don't have." I gripped the phone tighter. "Enjoy the title," I said quietly, "because that's all it is. A title." Her laughter rang in my ear before the line clicked dead. I stood there, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My own face looked back at me, pale but steady. They thought they'd won. They thought by crowning her and threatening me, I'd either crawl back or disappear. But they didn't know what was already in motion. The contract I had signed 2 days before was real. A European logistics firm had agreed to license my software for $100 million in projected revenue over the next 12 months. The ink was dry, the bank transfer already in process. I walked to my desk, pulled out the folder with the signed agreement, and ran my fingers across the embossed seal. Proof? hard and undeniable. They had taken their shot. They thought they'd ended me by choosing her. But what they had really done was give me the reason to end their illusion of control. People like to believe family rivalry starts suddenly like a switch flipping. But in my case, it had been simmering for decades, carefully nurtured by my parents' comparisons. Growing up, my sister and I were opposites. She was polished, charming, the girl who glided into a room and drew attention without effort. I was the one in the corner, tinkering with broken radios, sketching app ideas in the margins of my math homework. At 12, I built a crude scheduling program for my middle school's library computers. The librarian loved it. My parents? They rolled their eyes. Cute, Mom said. But grades matter more. Don't waste time on toys. When my sister won a debate trophy at 16, the family threw a dinner party. When I got an internship with a local software company the same year, I remember Dad's response perfectly. That's fine, Rachel. But internships don't mean anything long-term. Why don't you shadow your sister's debate coach instead? That would build real confidence. The message was clear. Her achievements were golden. Mine were paper scraps. By the time I graduated college with a computer science degree, I had stopped seeking their approval. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment, started freelancing, and saved every spare cent. At 23, I turned down their offer to come work at the firm. Dad slammed his fist on the dining room table. No one builds anything alone. You'll regret this rebellion. But I didn't regret it. Not even through the hard years, the ramen dinners, the nights I fell asleep at my desk surrounded by empty coffee cups, the loans I took to pay for cloud servers. Every rejection from investors made me hungrier. By 26, I had a prototype of my app that actually worked. By 27, I had my first contract in Europe. All the while, my sister's path was paved in gold. My parents paid her law school tuition, leased her a BMW for networking, and finally brought her into the firm as executive material. Meanwhile, when I asked for a small loan to cover server costs 1 year, Dad sneered. If your idea were worth anything, someone else would fund it. That was the pattern. She got backing. I got warnings. She got applause. I got silence. What's at stake for me now isn't just business. It's proving that the years I spent in the shadows, coding alone at 2 a.m., choosing grit over glamour were worth something. They crowned her CEO to erase me. But the numbers in my contracts, the ink on my agreements, are louder than their applause. And soon they'll hear every word. Saturday evening at 21:04, I sat at my desk with the window cracked open. The spring air carried the faint sound of traffic, but all I could hear was the rustle of paper as I opened the thick folder I'd been avoiding since signing the deal. The first page was the licensing agreement itself. Bold black letters. Exclusive software licensing contract, Senecta Logistics, GmbH. My company name, my signature, and theirs notarized with a blue ink stamp. I traced my finger across the embossed seal. The ridges rough beneath my skin. Behind it sat the financials. A wire transfer slip printed from my bank portal. $12,400,000 received April 14, 2025, 2:37 a.m. The line item looked surreal on the page, almost unreal, yet I remembered that night. I'd sat in this very chair. The glow of the monitor painting my face blue, refreshing the screen 3 times until I believed it. I pulled out the tax prepayment receipt from my accountant, stapled neatly. Anticipated revenue year 1. $100 million. My parents had told me to quit or leave, but here was the reality. My so-called nonsense project had just been valued at a figure that dwarfed the family firm. For a moment I just sat there, staring at the documents spread across the desk. The air smelled faintly of ink and toner from the printer I'd used earlier that day. My hands trembled slightly, not with fear but with the weight of it. I picked up my phone, snapped photo after photo, each image saved with the timestamp glowing at the top. 2116, 2117, 2118. I created a new folder labeled Proof of Independence. Just seeing the title made my chest loosen. To ground myself further, I pulled out an older reminder. A rejection email from 2 years ago, when a local investor laughed me out of his office. Your idea is too niche, not scalable. Focus on getting a real job. I printed that email and slipped it into the folder alongside the $12 4 million wire slip. Contrasts tell the clearest stories. I knew my parents would twist words if I confronted them outright. It's exaggerated. It's temporary. It doesn't mean anything. That's why I needed more than my word. I needed receipts, signatures, numbers they couldn't laugh away. I stacked everything neatly, slid it into a black leather portfolio, and zipped it shut. The sound was sharp, final, like closing a door. That night, before bed, I set the portfolio on the table near my apartment door. The shadows stretched across it like a guard. I whispered to myself, steady and certain. Next time I won't stay quiet. I had my first piece of evidence. And soon I would use it. Monday at 15:27, I found myself sitting in a downtown office that smelled faintly of leather and espresso. Across from me sat a man in a charcoal suit, Mr. Callahan, a corporate attorney recommended by a former client. He spread my documents across his mahogany desk, the sunlight catching on the glossy finish. He flipped through each page with a careful hand. First the licensing agreement, then the wire slip, then the incorporation certificate. His pen tapped against the shareholder records as he read the percentages aloud. 71% founder ownership. The rest with 2 silent investors. All notarized. My palms rested flat on my knees to stop them from fidgeting. So they can't dismiss this as fake? If I put these papers on the table in front of my family? He glanced up, eyes steady. They can argue feelings. They cannot argue signatures. This contract is enforceable across jurisdictions. And the bank transfer? That's as clean as it gets. It came through Swift. Every digit is traceable. He paused, leaning back. Rachel, what you have here isn't fragile. It's ironclad. The wall clock ticked softly to 15:39, each second reinforcing the weight of his words. But if they tried to interfere? I pressed. Claim the company belongs to the family? Or that I used their resources? He shook his head firmly. Impossible. You built this on your own. No capital from them, no employment ties, no co-signed documents. If they attempted to claim ownership, it would collapse under scrutiny. You have receipts for every server payment, every expense. The IRS would laugh them out of the room. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Mr. Callahan slid the documents back into the leather portfolio, closing it with deliberate care. The question isn't whether you can prove yourself. The question is when you'll choose to. I stared at the portfolio, the zipper cool under my fingertips. They made my sister CEO last week. They think I'm nothing. His lips curved in the faintest smile. Then it will be satisfying to show them what nothing looks like with 8 zeros at the end. When I stepped out into the street at 16:02, the city air smelled of hot pavement and roasted chestnuts from a cart nearby. Cars honked, people bustled. Life went on as if nothing monumental had just shifted. But inside me something had. I no longer doubted. The evidence wasn't just mine, it was a shield and a sword. And when I chose to use it, the entire balance of power in my family would tilt. 2 weeks later, on a crisp Friday evening at 19:02, my parents hosted what they called a celebration dinner for my sister's new title as CEO. The dining hall they'd rented glowed with chandeliers, and the air smelled faintly of wine and truffle risotto. Guests in suits and evening dresses filled the long tables, chatter swelling like static. I sat near the far end, my black leather portfolio resting quietly on my lap. I wasn't invited to speak, just to watch. That apparently was my place. At 19:14, Dad rose from his chair, raising a glass. His voice boomed. To our future. With our daughter leading Pearson Company, we step into a new era. She has vision, strength, and legacy. Applause rattled the crystal glasses. My sister stood, bowing her head slightly, basking in the glow. Mom leaned toward me, her whisper a dagger. Maybe now you'll see where you belong, Rachel. My pulse steadied. I slid the portfolio onto the table, the zippers sound sharp enough to draw a few eyes. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled out the licensing contract. At 19:18, I rose from my seat. The room quieted. One correction, I said, my voice even. She isn't the only one building a future. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I laid the contract flat on the white linen tablecloth, the embossed seal glinting under the chandelier light. Senecta Logistics GmbH. Exclusive license. Projected revenue. $100 million over 12 months. My name. My company. A murmur rippled through the guests. My sister's smile faltered. Dad's face hardened. Mom's wine glass trembled in her hand. I placed the bank slip beside it, the numbers bold. $12,400,000 wired April 14, 2025, 2:37 a.m. A cousin gasped. Someone near the front pulled out their phone, snapping a photo. Dad barked, "Rachel, sit down. This isn't the time." I met his gaze. Calm. Unshaken. "It's exactly the time. You told me to quit or walk away. You crowned her CEO. But while you were busy writing me out, I built something bigger than your firm has seen in a decade." The silence was electric, the kind that leaves no room for denial. At 1922, I closed the portfolio with a snap and tucked it back under my arm. I didn't wait for applause or approval. I just sat down, leaving the evidence on the table for everyone to see. The lever had been pulled. And in that moment the balance of power shifted. Not with a scream but with a signature in black ink. The silence after my words didn't last long. At 1925, it broke into whispers that grew louder with every passing second. 100 million? She has her own company? How did no one know? The chandelier's light seemed harsher now, exposing every flicker of doubt on the faces around me. My sister's fiancé leaned in toward her. His voice sharp but low. "Why didn't you tell me she was successful?" His words carried far enough that half the table caught them. Her face flushed crimson as she tried to smile, but her hands trembled against her wine glass. Dad tried to regain control. He stood, voice raised. "This is a distraction. A hobby project. Nothing compared to the legacy of Pierce & Company." But it was too late. One of the guests, a senior partner from a law firm, reached for the contract I'd laid down. He adjusted his glasses, reading aloud. "Exclusive license. 12.4 million received. Projected revenue 100 million. His voice echoed in the stunned room. At 1932, phones lit up across the hall as guests searched the company name, scrolling, muttering, showing each other their screens. A ripple of gasps confirmed it. Synecta wasn't just real, it was already making headlines in trade publications. Mom's hand gripped Dad's sleeve, her whisper harsh. "They know. Stop before you make it worse." By dessert, the celebration had collapsed into awkward silence. No one toasted. No one laughed. My sister disappeared into the restroom for nearly 20 minutes. When she returned, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. She didn't meet anyone's eyes. Later that night at 22:11, I returned to my apartment. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages from cousins, old classmates, even former colleagues. "Rachel, is it true? How did you hide this? Proud of you." My inbox, once quiet, pulsed with validation. But the family's responses were different. At 22:38, Dad left a voicemail. "You embarrassed us. You think this makes you powerful, but you've divided the family. Don't come running back when it falls apart." At 23:04, my sister sent a single text. "You ruined everything." I stared at the message, then set my phone down on the nightstand. The city lights flickered outside my window. No, I hadn't ruined anything. I'd simply refused to be erased. And now, the consequences of their ultimatum weren't mine to carry. They belonged to them. It was Wednesday evening, 2047, when the confrontation finally came. My parents showed up unannounced, standing stiff in the doorway of my apartment building's lobby. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet concrete from the rain that had fallen earlier. Dad held a manila folder tucked under his arm like a weapon. Mom's lips were pursed so tight they had turned white. "Rachel," Dad began, his voice low but brimming with anger. "This has gone far enough. You ambushed us, embarrassed us in front of our partners. Do you have any idea what damage you've done?" I stood a step higher on the staircase, meeting their eyes evenly. "I didn't ambush anyone. I told the truth. You're angry because the story you built collapsed the moment facts came out." Mom's eyes flashed. "You think some flashy numbers make you better than family legacy? That contract is temporary. Our firm has been standing for 40 years. I pulled my leather portfolio from the tote slung over my shoulder. With slow precision, I opened it and held up the wire transfer slip. The numbers glowed under the harsh fluorescent light. $12,400,000 received, April 14, 2025, 2:37 a.m. This isn't temporary, I said. This is already in my account. The licensing deal runs 5 years. Renewals extend it to 10. I don't need legacy, I built my own. Dad's jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the folder. You'll regret this, Rachel. Family protects each other. Family doesn't air dirty laundry. I closed the portfolio with a crisp snap. Family doesn't threaten their own daughter to quit or be disowned. Family doesn't crown one child CEO and erase the other. You drew the line at that dinner. All I did was refuse to disappear. The wall clock in the lobby ticked past 20:59, the sound sharp in the silence. Mom's voice cracked then, softer, almost pleading. You're tearing us apart. I shook my head. No. You tore us apart the moment you forced an ultimatum. I'm just refusing to play the part you wrote for me. For a long moment no one spoke. Rain dripped from their coats, forming small dark circles on the marble floor. Finally, Dad muttered, You've destroyed everything we built. I stepped back, resting my hand on the banister steady. No, I destroyed nothing. I built something of my own. That's the truth. They turned and left without another word. The heavy glass door closed behind them with a hollow thud. The gap was sealed. Their version of me had collapsed. Only mine remained. It's been 4 months since that night in the lobby, and my life feels entirely different. Most mornings now start at 6:32, with the soft hum of my coffee machine and the glow of my laptop on the dining table. The apartment smells faintly of roasted beans and fresh ink from the printer I bought last month. An indulgence after years of running everything on borrowed equipment. My calendar fills quickly. Investor calls, strategy sessions, contract reviews. Synecta Systems has expanded into 2 more countries, and our revenue projections pass $120 million just last week. The black leather portfolio still sits on the shelf by my desk, but I don't need to carry it anymore. I don't need proof at the ready. I know what I've built, and so does the rest of the world. My parents? The silence between us has grown like a canyon. The last message from Dad arrived 6 weeks ago. You're welcome back when you're ready to be part of the family business. I didn't respond. My sister unfollowed me on every platform, though I noticed her anonymous account lurking on my company's LinkedIn posts. It doesn't sting anymore. It just confirms how much the balance shifted. My rules are simple now. I don't step into rooms where I'm expected to shrink. I don't hand over my work for crumbs of approval. I don't explain success to people committed to denying it. Instead, I focus on what's ahead. I've hired a small team, 4 engineers and a project manager, who sit in our modest office downtown, laptops glowing, ideas bouncing off the whiteboard walls. At lunch, I sometimes bring them bagels from the corner bakery, the kind of gesture my parents would have dismissed as unprofessional. But here it means something. I've started running again too, early mornings along the river. The air is sharp, the water cold, and every step reminds me I'm moving under my own power. This fall, I'll be flying to Berlin to deliver a keynote at a global logistics conference. My name will be on the program, not hidden in the shadows of my sister's title. The thought steadies me, my voice, my work, my story. I'm not the daughter silenced at a dinner table anymore. I'm not the one waiting for permission to exist. I'm the woman who took their ultimatum, turned it inside out, and built her own life from it. And for the first time, the future belongs only to me.